Hey everyone, it's Zahava. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be looking at my top 10 reads of 2025. These books are not all 5-star books, but they're books that have stuck with me, that I read and really remembered and often refer to and will often recommend. So I'm just basically going to tell you why I picked those books, what they mean to me, and why I think that you might enjoy them as well. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. This is a book that is the first in a series of 4 romantasy books that are kind of cozy, and it centers around Stephen and Grace. Stephen, who is a paladin serving in the temple of the White Rat being a god who has fallen or is no longer in existence, and the paladins are mourning this god, but they're still very loyal to the god, and Grace, who is a perfumer, who is down on her luck, and they get caught up in some political intrigue in the city of Archon, and they have to sort of figure out why Grace is being framed for a murder that she didn't commit, and Stephen kind of comes to her aid, and together they solve whatever political machinations are going on in the plot of this story. It's a really cute story. I love it. We have some middle-aged characters. Grace is in her 30s. Stephen is in his 40s. He knits socks to sort of keep himself sane. That's his hobby of choice. And, you know, they're just awkward and fumbling and super cute when they get together. And of course, you're introduced to other characters who will come back in later books. And it just sort of completes the whole world and universe. Plus, the cover is amazing for this book, you have to admit. So I've talked about this book before on the channel. I can let you guys know in the info card up here where exactly I did my reports on it if you want to go check out those videos. This one happened to be a 5-star read for me, but again, as I've said, the other books that you see may not all be 5-star reads, but this one is one that's going to stick with me for a really long time. Next up, we have Susanna Clarke's Piranesi. This one is in a category all on its own. We are following our titular character, Piranesi, as he takes care. He's kind of like a caretaker for a home that has an infinite number of doors and hallways, and he has to make sure that it doesn't flood. And what's interesting about this character is that as we get to know him, we come to realize that this home where he's staying is the only home he's ever known. He has no recollection of his life before being caretaker of this house. And so the only other person that Piranesi comes in contact with on a regular basis in this book is a character known as the Other, who sort of randomly appears at various intervals to have conversations with Piranesi about how his caretaking is going. And then there's, again, not really much more you can say about the novel without giving away too much and ruining it. But if you like a lyrical type of story where somebody is trying to figure out why it is that they can't remember what they're certain that they're supposed to remember, this book is really going to give you that. It's definitely going to take you to a place that I have never encountered in fantasy literature. It's just so creative and everything wraps up really nicely at the end. And I don't know, it's really hard to talk about this book a lot. I feel like if you haven't heard people talking about this book, then maybe you're living under a rock. I don't know. But I would definitely suggest that you guys check it out. It reads really quickly. It's sort of epistolarian because as you're reading it, you're reading through Piranesi's journals and how he takes notes of everything that he observes throughout his lifetime in this house. So we kind of discover things as Piranesi is discovering things, and that's kind of a fun way to go through a book, I think. So it's very character driven, and I think that fans of character-driven novels, especially character-driven fantasy novels, will really enjoy this one as well. But for me, this was a 5-star read and one of my all-time favorites of this year. The next book I'm going to talk about, which was also a 5-star for me, was Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. It was my first that I have ever read of this author. I did not even know about her or think that she would be the type of author for me before I picked this book up, but I picked it up because I liked the premise of a psychic getting on an airplane and randomly selecting passengers and telling them how they were going to die. And then we kind of find out throughout the rest of the novel whether or not this psychic's predictions have come true. And I just loved the storytelling. I found it was a really quick read. There were short chapters which really helped to get the pages turning for me because I'm somebody that's really attracted to short chapters. It really helps me to get through a book, especially since this one is over 500 pages long. So you have a third-person point of view narrator that follows you along the other passengers that are in the plane and how their lives unfold after the psychic speaks with them. And the only point of view narrator, which is first person, is actually going to be the psychic herself, and then you're going to get the inner workings of her head and her life and what turned her into a psychic in the first place. So I think that if you guys are into a lit fic that has a little bit of a mysterious and paranormal element, you guys will really like this one. I find Liane Moriarty's writing very accessible, and I would recommend this book to pretty much anybody who would ask me for a good run-of-the-mill lit fic with, you know, that sort of leaves you in your feels. The next book I'm going to talk to you about, I actually don't have a copy of because I took it out from the library, but it is one that I am going to buy and add to my collection, and that is Worst Case Scenario by T.J. Newman. And this one is the third in a series of airplane thriller novels that she writes. So T.J. Newman used to be a flight attendant. Now I believe she is a full-time writer, and I believe that her books are also being optioned into movies, although I'm not holding my breath for when those movies are going to come out because as far as I can tell, they've been picked up, but no production or casting or anything has been done. So I doubt very much if we're going to see that in the next couple of years, but you shouldn't prevent yourselves from reading her books because they are top-notch, edge-of-your-seat thriller books. They have to do with plane crashes or plane disasters. So maybe if you're afraid of flying, it's not the right book for you. But if you're not, I think Worst Case Scenario is a really good jumping off point. Now, she's got 3 books. I've talked about this before on the channel, and maybe you guys have seen my latest video of the 26 books that I want to read in 2026, one of which is Falling, which is her first of her 3 novels. Now, I read her novels, again, in order 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3, but they're not a series, so you don't really need to read them in order. With that said, let me tell you about Worst Case Scenarios. So this has to do with an airplane that experiences some distress and ends up crashing into a nuclear power plant in a small town in the northern USA. I'm not sure if it's Minnesota or Maine, or I'll write it on the screen for you guys. I'll look it up because I don't remember it. I'm going like entirely by memory here, but it has to do with how the characters of the small town come together because outside authorities can't get to them. It causes pretty much a disaster where there's no communication, and they have to rely on their own wits and their own strengths and their own resources in order to basically control this disastrous situation, which of course will leave a mark on this town forever and its characters forever. And I just want to say, for those of you who have read it, you guys will understand, but for those of you who haven't, I feel like the ultimate hero in this particular novel is a 6-year-old girl because she's so smart and so intuitive and so observant that just like the one thing that she says pretty much pivots the entire novel and I want to say like saves everybody involved. So I really was rooting for the like I found myself really rooting for the characters in this book, but I also want to put out a warning that if you guys are really sensitive to authors that are cruel to their characters, you will see that T.J. Newman is that she really does not hold back when it comes to the gritty truths of what has to happen in order for the stories to be told in a very moving way. And I devoured the 2 out of the 3 books that I've read so far of hers. This one, Worst Case Scenario, took me 2 days. Maybe I was really mean to anybody that tried to talk to me while I was reading this book. So I highly recommend that you guys pick it up and give it a shot if you haven't heard about it already. I thought that it was absolutely fantastic. The next book is also a book that I borrowed from the library, and it is I Who Have Never Known Men. This is a novella by Jacqueline Hartman, I believe is her name. Again, I'm going just by memory here, but I'll put a picture across the screen for you guys. And she is a French author, and this book was written, I believe, somewhere around the 1960s, and it has to do with a girl who's growing up sort of imprisoned in an underground bunker type situation with a whole bunch of other women, and there are guards on the door, and those guards are men, but she's not allowed to speak to the men, and she's not allowed to have any interactions with them. And then one day, as the cage is open, because they're going to do an exchange of, I don't know if it's food or goods or something like that, is supposed to come into their bunker. And then all of a sudden, there is kind of like a call where the men just kind of disappear. They go back to wherever they appeared from, and the cage door is left open, allowing finally, after years and years and years, for these women to escape. And then, the novel kind of goes on with a girl who has grown up basically only knowing the company of other women, sort of discovering what the world is like. And it's kind of like a science fiction dystopian coming of age situation, which leaves you feeling haunted, I would think, at the end. I found the book very haunting, but that is probably because I did the audio version, and I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me. So it is a short book. I would suggest that you guys pick up the audio like I did. I thought that the narrator was fantastic. The storytelling was just beautifully written. It really makes you think. It's one of those books that makes you think. So you'll expect to feel a little unsettled, but I had a really good time with it, and I would definitely recommend that people give it a try. Next book I want to talk to you guys about is Maeve Fly, another audiobook that I listened to this year that has really stuck with me. The cover is amazing. I don't happen to own a copy of it. It was an audio listen from the library for me, but still I had a really great time with it. We are following Maeve. I want to say she's between 23, 26 years old. She's working at a park that is Disney adjacent. They don't specifically mention that she's working at Disneyland or Disney World, but she's playing a princess, and her best friend is also playing a princess. So it's pretty obvious that they are working in this type of a theme park. And she is kind of like, I don't want to say a social outcast. She's not like a social outcast, but she's somebody that doesn't really feel that she belongs socially. So she has her best friend, and her best friend's brother comes into town, and then Maeve sort of develops a crush on her best friend's brother, and they begin a relationship. And Maeve is kind of like a cynic. She doesn't like all the fakery around her. She's currently living with her elderly and ailing grandmother, who's kind of a pill herself. And we get to discover more about Maeve's grandmother and how she got to be in the house that she's living in, because she used to be a Hollywood starlet, and she's living in the legacy of her film career. And Maeve is kind of in awe and kind of idolizes her grandmother in a way, but also they have this kind of friction. And Maeve is just trying to figure her way through her young adulthood, and maybe she has a little bit of a penchant for the dark side. Yeah, so this book was definitely one of my more memorable books this year. It's a book that I don't own, but I would definitely get a copy and add it to my bookshelf, not because I'm going to reread it, but because I'm going to, it's just because I feel like it represents something that I would like to see on my bookshelf eventually. But I don't know, maybe I will reread it one day, but I just really, really enjoyed it. The ending gutted me. I was gutted by the ending of this book, you guys, okay? Like, it did not go where I wanted it to go, but I guess that that's kind of part and parcel of having a horror novel. I wouldn't say that it's like straight horror, but I would say that it definitely has some pretty graphic body horror and horrific elements in it. And I just like, I don't know, I feel like I really wanted it to end differently, and like I'm really mad at the author. Like, I understand why they did what they did, but I'm mad because I wanted to see it end, let's just say, in the opposite way than how it did. Next up, I want to talk about Chain Gang All-Stars. So this is a book that I really, really enjoyed the premise of. It's kind of hard to explain the setting aside from the fact that we are following what is the story about essentially a dystopian American prison system. There's a lot of people of color that are in this prison system, obviously, and then we get to learn commentary about the injustices of the American prison system, but it takes place in the setting of sort of like a gladiator arena. So what happens is they have this program which is televised. I want to say it's giving Hunger Games a little bit, because it's exploiting on people's misfortune, and those who are imprisoned have a chance to win their freedom by fighting in an arena to the death, which if they do survive after 3 years of combat, they can win their freedom. And we are following the point of view of certain prisoners. We are following the announcer or MC of the televised show, and we're also following some of the patrons or spectators of the show, which would be the people at home that are watching the show, consuming the show, and rooting for their favorite combatants. And the reason that we call it Chain Gang All-Stars is because they are fighting sort of linked together, all in a chain, and they have these cameras kind of circling around them, which will follow them into their public lives and their private lives. I'm talking about the combatants in this case. And it's just kind of like a very surreal, somewhat historical reflection on, again, the American prison system and where it has potentially the danger to go, kind of Black Mirror style. At the bottom of many of the pages, you will have footnotes where the author will give you actual statistics about the American prison system, and they will, of course, be very relevant to whatever you happen to be reading on the page. This one stuck with me. I will reread it. This is definitely going to be a reread for me. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to happen, if it's going to be 2026, if it's going to be later, but I could definitely see myself rereading this book, and I really, really highly recommend it. I also heard that the audio version is really good. If you guys have listened to the audio version, please let me know how you found it to play out. I heard it's good. I might try and get it. I don't know. Maybe sometimes on a reread, audio works better for me. So anyway, I loved this book so much that I bought my own copy. I had originally taken it out of the library, but I loved it and I wanted it on my bookshelf, so here it is. I highly recommend you guys pick it up. Book number 8 that I am going to talk about is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. Unfortunately, this is also a book that I took out of the library. It's not unfortunate that I took it out of the library, but it's unfortunate because I don't have a copy, and it's one of those books that I really want to get a copy eventually one day. But yeah, this is a book about a family who are the caretakers of a seed bank on a fictional island called Shearwater Island, which is an island that is in between Australia and Antarctica, and where, as I said, the world's most precious seeds are safeguarded in case there is a world disaster, in which case we need to be replanting and rejuvenating the world, and we would have access to all these seeds. Now, that is based on a real island, which is Macquarie Island, and it's sort of like fictionalized to be Shearwater Island in this novel. So we're following the Salt family as they deal with having to close down the island on a very short time frame because the tide levels are rising and the seed bank is in jeopardy. And most of the island's other inhabitants have already been evacuated from the island. And so basically the only people left are Dominic and his 3 children. And then one day, mysteriously, a naked, roughed up body washes up ashore. It's a woman. She's passed out completely. They nurse her back to health. And then they have to figure out how on earth she managed to get there, why she's there, and what the mystery surrounding this woman is. And so you have a very kind of vibey mystery situation going on, but I wouldn't call this book a mystery thriller. I would call it, you know, something of a lit fic more. I'm not, you know, if you're looking for a heart-pounding mystery thriller, you're not going to get it with this book. This book is really just vibes. I do have kind of a spoilery review of this book, which I can link in the info card if you guys want to go check it out. Other than that, I want to say that this book had the most beautiful writing, the most beautiful prose. I just devoured this book. I ate it up. I read through it super duper fast. But at the same time, the way it's written kind of forces you to slow down. There was so much beauty in the prose, the writing, the symbolism, even so much as the characters' names. Everything worked out exactly the way it needed to. I absolutely loved the ending. I felt it was really just, everything about this book just really, really spoke to me. And it was my first by this author. I'd never read anything by Charlotte McConaughey before. Of course, I'm going to read her backlist. I hear that her other books are excellent. I've tried to read Once There Were Wolves, but I managed to get it from the library and I never had time to read it. And I do have a copy of Migrations. So you guys can let me know what you think about those 2 books if you have read them. But other than that, Wild Dark Shore, for me, chef's kiss, and I would absolutely recommend it. Book number 9 in my top 10 books that I have read this year is Room by Emma Donoghue. This was not a 5-star read for me, but it is a book that will stick with me and live rent-free in my mind for a very, very long time. This is a much older book. I think it was published in, I want to say 2010, and there was a movie that was made in 2015, if my dates are correct, which stars Brie Larson, and it was such a stellar performance. The book is told through the eyes of 5-year-old Jack, who has grown up in a room, and that's pretty much all he knows. He sort of personifies the objects in the room, and he calls chair chair with a capital C and blanket blanket with a capital B. And his whole entire world has been made up for him by his mom, who is trying to make his life as normal as possible, knowing that she is the victim of a kidnapping and that the kidnapper is actually Jack's father. So yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on in this book, but it's really a story about resilience, about a mother's deep, deep love for her child and what she will go through in order to make her child's love as normal as possible. I'm not making a comment on whether what she decided to do was right or not, but I think this book is really worth the read because we are seeing the whole story unfold from 5-year-old Jack's perspective. And we begin as we go through it to understand why things are done in the way that they're done. And that is so that what can happen and what the author intends to show in the latter half, because this book is kind of broken up into 4 parts. So there's no chapters. It's just like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. We can understand what the author was trying to do with this novel, but it kind of will take a turn about halfway through the book, and you'll understand when you read it. Now, I have a copy of this book, but I actually also did this one on audio. I found it to be really well done, aside from the fact that I don't know why, and I spoke about this before on the channel, but the narrator put on the voice, because they're actors, right? So they put on the voice of a 5-year-old kid. And I found that a little bit jarring when I first got into the audio version of this book, but then in the end, it was kind of normal. So I was like, okay, and I was able to get through it. And I ended up actually doing some immersion reading with this book, but I did like the audio quite well. I will say that having done the immersion reading of this hardcover versus the audio, there were some words and things that were skipped around or not read properly, or maybe maybe the narrator was working with a different version of the book, but so if you're going to do immersion reading, just make a note of that some of the words will be a little bit different here and there, but generally speaking, someone would either read the book or just listen to the audio, so it probably won't really affect your understanding of it. It doesn't really change anything in the end. It's only a couple of words here and there, which I'm kind of being nitpicky about, but I loved this book, and I love the audio version of this book, and I also love the movie. I think everything was done really, really well, and it's a very unique idea. I really loved it. And then lastly, also on the subject of family trauma, and maybe also a little bit of recency bias, and maybe I was on a Brie Larson kick, I don't know, but I also want to talk to you about The Glass Castle. This is book number 10 that has stuck with me this year. Now, with that said, I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of the video that I'm only going to be reporting on books between January and the end of November, because I want you guys to see this video in December. So all of my December reads, I'm going to kind of collect for next year in 2026. So I just want to put that out there. But this is probably because of some recency bias, but that's okay. It's my channel and I'm allowed if I want to. The Glass Castle. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls is the story of a family that has grown up. I don't think the word dysfunctional can really encompass what is happening here. It is like children that are starving for physical needs like shelter, clothing, food, and I would say also even a lot of their emotional needs were not met as they were growing up. It's a family of 4 whose parents chose to be poor, chose to live in ramshackle houses, and, you know, children that were resilient enough to break out of that cycle and make lovely lives for themselves in New York City after having traveled throughout their childhood and adolescence all over the country and were sort of made to raise themselves. It's really a book that I think is very nuanced, and I would not be so presumptuous as to give an opinion as to the parenting that was done, because this is a memoir, because I wasn't there, I didn't live it, I just enjoyed the story. So I'm not making a comment as to whether or not I think that Jeanette's parents did right or wrong. Certainly, you guys are entitled to your opinions if you've read it. There are some things though that make you question why the parents did not provide food, shelter, and clothing for their children the way they should do. But they provided other things like creativity and life lessons and philosophy, which of course doesn't nourish and doesn't clothe and doesn't provide for the 3 basic needs that we have as human beings. However, you could see somehow that in their twisted way, they really loved their children. So I don't know, it's like a very unique memoir, not something that I've ever come across. I feel like everyone should read it. It's got really great reviews. I really enjoyed it. Again, short chapters on this one. I read through it super fast. I think I finished it in under a week, which is pretty good for me for nonfiction that I didn't listen to on audio. This one was read with my own 2 eyes, so the fact that I did it in less than a week is really great. I don't think I gave it 5 stars. I'll put my star rating across the screen for this one, but again, this is a book that's going to stick with me for a really, really long time, and that I will ceaselessly recommend to anyone looking for a very moving, shocking memoir. All right, you guys, so that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed hearing all about my top 10 favorite reads of this year. Let me know in the comments which of these books you have read or want to read or are going to make it on your TBR. And if you have read them, let's discuss them in the comments and see what we each thought about them. Thank you so much for being here again. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please take a moment to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you want to, and I will see you again in the next video. Ciao for now.